Hey guys, I'm here for another Women's Prize review, this time on another debut, See What I Have Done by Sarah Schmidt. I usually don't do this kind of thing, but the bottom of my shirt is really fun and sort of matches the vibes of the book. Anyway, I had quite a mixed experience with this one. Some definite highs and some serious lows, so let's get into it. This is a fictionalized account of the Lizzie Borden murders. If you're like me and had never heard of them, in 1892, Lizzie was an American woman who was put on trial for the murders of her father and stepmother, who were both brutally mutilated with an axe. This novel mostly focuses on the day before and the day of the murders, and we get four first-person perspectives: Lizzie herself, her older sister Emma, the Borden's Irish housemaid Bridget, and a stranger named Benjamin. First things first, if you're planning to read this novel, don't expect a plot-based thriller, a whodunit, or a thorough examination of this family. I think the marketing as a family crime drama has probably hooked some readers who were then like, what is this book? Like, what is it even trying to do? For me, this is first and foremost an atmosphere novel. It's invested in creating a general mood, much more so than in ironing out any specifics. We see this lack of specifics in the portrayal of the family dynamics. Emma and Lizzie are 41 and 32 respectively at the time of the murders, both spinster daughters still living at home, and their relationship is the heart of the book for me. Lizzie is a bit off in the head, and as the reader, you might think at first that this is due to trauma because the book opens with her finding her father with half his face chopped off, but you quickly learn that she's always been an odd duck who lives at the mercy of bizarre, childish impulses. Emma is much more normal, but fiercely loyal to Lizzie, and we learn about some of the sacrifices Emma has made over the years to prioritize Lizzie's happiness over her own or anyone else's. Their parents' personalities are much murkier, so their father seems to be a generally unpleasant man, although there are hints that maybe he wasn't always like this, and we know that he strikes Lizzie occasionally and belittles Emma, but we never learn the full extent of his possible physical or emotional abuse towards them. And when it comes to their stepmother, Emma never liked her, but Lizzie took to her early on as a child, and we're never given potential reasons for when or why that changed. We only know that at the time of the book, Lizzie can't stand either of her parents, and they can't stand her. I think this is a weakness that we have to take so much of this toxic family energy on faith with very little understanding of the history or motivations at play. There's a lot of resentment bobbing around that remains unanchored. So the family history is one ingredient of the book's general atmosphere, but two complementary ingredients and the book's main strengths for me are the sensory details and the disgust for the human body. The murders take place in July, and the Bordens live in an old, stuffy home. The air outside is sweltering, and inside there's no ventilation, so it's putrid. Schmidt focuses on details like the sound of a clock ticking in the background, and the sickly, sticky taste of pears from the garden. Made me think of a line from the novel Animal Dreams by Barbara Kingsolver, where the protagonist realizes that she doesn't want to become a doctor because she views the human body as a temple to nastiness. And that's exactly how Schmidt treats the human body in here. This book is full of sweat, blood, vomit, head lice, urine, and BO, and food stuck in people's teeth. Like, it is gross and 100% intentional to give you the feeling that all humans are decomposing even as we live, and that it's laughable to treat the body like it's something sacred when in its natural state it's so corrupted and repulsive. And if this is the state of our bodies, what does that reflect about the state of our souls? There are paragraphs and sometimes full scenes of striking, evocative writing. Bridget has a memory of the sisters buying a lot of fruit one day and says, "The eating had been done on the side steps, the smell of orange, burst juice tang, a dance for the tongue and nose, the way peaches wept down fingers, wet lips. The sisters bent over their parted knees, sat away Mr. Borden would never allow. They slobbered the fruits, suckling babies. I mean, a lot of passages are really satisfying to read out loud for the sound and rhythm of the words. And for me, Emma's chapters had by far the most moments where the writing really sang. There's a scene later in the book where she's scrubbing her father's blood off the sofa, and it's visceral, the scrubbing and rinsing and noticing the water in her bucket getting redder and redder. Then there's a moment soon after when she's looking at Lizzie and thinking about how she always felt constricted by the past, but now she realizes there wasn't much left. The life I'd had was disappearing. Every adult who had ever held me as a baby was dead, and no one would ever carry me again. I looked at my sister, looked at blood, that grief inside the heart. So there's obviously that duality of looking at her sister, her flesh and blood, and looking at the blood on her hands that came from the man whose body created both of theirs. And it's like she's imagining their hearts pumping their private grief through those bodies so that if they were to be cut, it would spill out onto the floor. That being said, I found a lot of the sentence by sentence writing in here bewildering, and I don't mean that in a the author's being really creative with this disorienting language kind of way. I mean bewildering like this isn't how the English language works. So here are some examples chosen from many possibilities. There's a moment when Lizzie's walking down the street and she remarks, "I felt my lips turn a smile." Your lips turn a smile? Why describe it in such a distracting way when you could just say she smiled? Are those unnecessary words supposed to be adding flavor or emotion? Because they don't. Then there's a scene soon after where Lizzie says, "Sometimes father's beard would wet with anger, and when he spoke to you, came close to your face so you could hear his words, the wet would stroke your chin and sink in." Okay, so we have wet being verbed and nouned in here. Is that supposed to be sweat or spit? And why would you describe either as stroking someone else's chin and sinking? Like, what is that evoking? Later in the book, Lizzie recalls a time when, as children, she and Emma were playing in the kitchen and had an exchange that started with Emma prompting her to dip into the flour. "Lizzie, would you like to be invisible?" "A ghosty?" She nodded, like a jump. "Yes." How? What? Like, how do you nod like a jump? And I could be accused of overthinking this because it's not meant to be a strictly physical description, I guess. But what does it mean physically or metaphorically? That the nod was jerky? That it symbolized that they were about to take a leap by being disobedient? I don't get it. There's so much of this sloppy, nonsensical word choice, and I found it all a bit maddening. And since so much of it was tied to her use of metaphors, it made me think about something that I've joked about before, which is that all writers should start out with a metaphor license. But then if you abuse that power, your license should be suspended until you prove that you can write a clean, dynamic, logical sentence without a metaphor. See What I Have Done also has larger narrative problems, most clearly Benjamin. Why do we spend a quarter of the novel following this random man who has the most paint-by-numbers backstory and motivation imaginable, adds almost nothing to the plot, and offers no new insights about the family? And apart from his chapters contributing little internally, they kill the emotional momentum of the book as a whole. And because of its structure, there's very little plot-based momentum to speak of, which is another questionable choice for a crime novel. But every time we're moving toward the deeper truths about this family, we're ripped back to this boring rando for 20 pages. Like, it drove me up the wall. At the moment, I'm doing some work at a literary agency. I'll leave a link to me talking about that below if you're interested. And if this had come to me in manuscript form, Benjamin would have been snippety snipped within the first half hour of me getting my hands on it. Like, good God. Also, Bridget is a largely untapped character. Theoretically, as the maid, she's in a position to help us understand dimensions of this family that Lizzie and Emma can't articulate, but she contributes very little on that front. And ultimately, I think this novel should have been dominated, page-wise, by the sisters, with occasional more purposeful asides from Bridget. So a debut that's interesting in a lot of ways and disappointing in others. I don't really have an overall take on it because for me it was such a mix of flops and successes, but I'd be very interested to know what your experience was if you've read it or what your impressions are if you haven't, and I'll see you soon for another Women's Prize review. Bye guys, thanks for watching.